In this lesson, we are going to look at a feature that allows you to calculate the cost to manufacture a sheet metal part. But before we get into that feature, let's talk about the sheet metal part we have on the screen. This part was created in an earlier lesson, and it lends itself nicely to the feature that we're covering now. If you would like to follow along with me, you can open the part called Converting to Sheet Metal Finished, which can be located in your Working Files folder. The command I am looking for is called costing. It can be found in the Evaluate ribbon, but in the Evaluate ribbon, most likely you will be required to go to the far right and select the arrows that point to the right, and then costing. Or another option is to go to the Tools drop-down menu and select costing. Now, as soon as I select costing, you will see a window on the far right of the screen, which is currently updating, along with a new tab and window. Going over to the Property Manager for costing, notice at the very top, I have a button for costing options. If I select it, a dialog box opens, allowing you to set basic cost options. Now, many of these features are grayed out, and that's because of my selection here for template processing. It's currently at Use Sheet Metal Template for sheet metal parts. However, if I change it to Use Machining Template for sheet metal parts, many of the grayed out options are now available. I am going to close out of this dialog box by selecting Cancel. And then going back to the Property Manager, notice I have a costing template. Solidworks provides two templates, Metric and English. And you also have the capability to customize the template based on your values. Okay, looking at our current dialog box, notice in the far left-hand column, under Sheet Metal, I have General, Material, Thickness, and then 4 items under Operations. Starting with General, we can set the currency, along with the format for the currency. Under Material, we see currently 7 materials are part of this template, and to add additional materials, we simply select Class, a drop-down list opens, and then we select the desired material. Under Thickness, based on the material class and the material itself, along with the thickness, we can specify a cost. And again, if I scroll to the bottom, I have the option to add new materials. Let's go to the operations, and I will begin with cut. At the very top of this dialog box, I currently have 3 cut methods: water jet, plasma, and laser. And currently, my default is laser. And notice for each one of these, I have a setup cost. I can modify these values or add additional cut methods and setup cost. The same is true for hole features: punch, tapped holes, and drill. And right below this, based on the class and the material, along with the thickness and the cut method, I can specify cost and any additional cost. I'm going to go back to the left-hand column and select Bend. We see a very similar screen as the cut screen. Once again, we have a bend method, setup cost, hem, setup cost, and based on the class, material, thickness, and the bend method, I can assign a cost. The same is also true for library features like louvers and lances. Currently, louvers in the list with a setup cost of $20. And just like the other screens, the cost is based on these specs that you see here. And the last one is custom. This would be used for any additional cost currently not covered in these other settings. Now, if I made changes, I would want to do a file save as. It's always good to do a save as because you do not want to overwrite your default templates provided by Solidworks. I'm simply going to close out of this since I did not change any settings and move down the Property Manager. Now, I do want you to keep an eye on the lower half of this Property Manager. You will see the values update as I apply settings on the upper half of the Property Manager. So for class, if I select steel, notice my current cost for one part is $15.45. Now if I select galvanized steel under name, my cost is $18.86, where the cost before selecting galvanized steel was $15.45. So my cost dropped 22% by going from plain carbon steel to galvanized steel. Now notice we see a thickness of 1.5 millimeters. That is based on the part model itself, but you can modify the thickness if needed. I'm going to leave it at 1.5. Now it may appear that we are done with the property manager, but notice we have a scroll bar here. So we're going to pull this down a little bit. In this window, we can specify a material cost. Currently it's at $5.07. Right below this, we have blank size. Now in order for me to demonstrate this to you, I need to close out of this property manager and go to sheet metal ribbon and flatten the part. I will fit this to the screen, go back into costing, and now returning to my blank size, the area to cost is bounding box. The bounding box is the size of box required to fit the sheet metal part inside of. Other options for calculating cost are flat pattern area, custom sheet size, and custom area. I will leave it at bounding box, and the next item is offset. Notice my bounding box is making contact with the far edges of the sheet metal part. If I want to provide an offset, I simply input a new value, and notice because of the offset, the current cost per part is increasing. But I'm not seeing anything on the screen. That's because the preview and graphic area checkbox is not selected. So if I select it, notice the offset between the bounding box and the new 3mm value. Scrolling down the property manager, you can input a percent of scrap. You can also input total number of parts. Obviously, the more parts, the lower cost per part. If I decrease the total number of parts to 25, you will see the current cost increases by 6%. The last item in the property manager is markup and discount. This allows you to specify a markup or discount based on a percentage of total cost or a percentage of material cost. I will input a percentage of total cost at 5%. Notice we are currently at $21.34 per part. If I go back to material and I change from galvanized steel to AISI 304, the cost of the part is up considerably by 90%. Right below this, we have a breakdown of the $40.55. 66% of the cost is for material, 29% for manufacturing, and 5% for markup. The last item in this property manager allows you to generate a report and to publish the report. I'll cancel out of this dialog box, over to the feature manager tree. Notice for flat pattern, we have various costs. We have 2 costs for setup, a laser setup, and a bend setup, along with costs associated with cut paths and bends. So as you can see, this will allow you to design a sheet metal part and play around with different values as far as material, thickness, and manufacturing operations.